Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
What do you want with me?
Talk about a classic. 172 years later, there are many adaptations of A Christmas Carol, including one by his very own great-great-grandson. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, Gerald Charles Dickens. The actor, director, and producer is in Nebraska for just a few days and has graciously agreed to join us. Thank you so much for being here.
You are very welcome. It's my great pleasure.
Welcome to the program. I have to ask you first and foremost, what brings you here to Nebraska?
Well, this is part of a nationwide tour of my performances of A Christmas Carol, and I've been coming to Omaha for 5 years now, working with the Douglas County Historical Society to perform both A Christmas Carol and a number of other shows for them. And I love coming back here. I love returning to Omaha. It's a great, great place.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you like about us?
You know, very, very friendly people, you know. and that's always the case. Wherever I travel, my favorite places, it's nothing to do with a venue or an audience size, or it's to do with the people you meet. And the people at Douglas County Historical are just so good to work with and put on fantastic shows. So it's
fantastic. Okay, so going to ask you to tell us about Charles Dickens.
What an inspiring gentleman he was. Charles Dickens was an extraordinary success story of his era and really broke the mold of his time, because he managed to elevate himself through the social classes, which in Britain was just something that didn't happen. He had a very difficult childhood, a very poor childhood. His father was imprisoned for debt. And Charles was sent to work to raise money to clear the debt. At the age of only 12 years old, he was sent to work in demeaning, menial, rat-infested factory in London. And he said to himself that I have got to break out of this. I've got to achieve something more. And the fascinating thing was his inspiration was a house he had seen when he was a little boy with his father. And his father had said, if you ever want to own a house like that, you have to work hard. You have to do your best. You have to be very persevering. And in those dark hours, little Charles Dickens, just remembered those words. I have to work hard. Even though I'm in a factory doing menial work, I have to do it the best I can. Otherwise, I can never achieve anything. And then he became a journalist, and then he started writing the novels, and all the time, that is what drove him. And then he became the most popular celebrity, I mean, the equivalent of a rock star today, in Victorian society. It was an extraordinary. In a way, he epitomised the American dream, which I think is one reason why he's so popular here. But because he had just worked and worked and worked and made a success of his life.
Why do you suppose journalism, of all the things that he could have done, why did he choose to become a writer?
It's not a very romantic answer, actually. His father was looking to place him somewhere to work, and he had a contact with someone who worked for a newspaper who was well acquainted with the editor, so can we just get young Charles in as a junior reporter? But he very quickly got himself an incredible reputation for accuracy and speed and observation. He had a great eye, even as a young man, saw everything, and he would write notes on his shirt cuff. Because he didn't have paper to hand, so he'd scribble notes on his shirt cuff if he was travelling back in a stagecoach or something from witnessing the reporting he did was mainly political, so he travelled around the country a lot watching politicians campaigning and giving speeches and that sort of thing. And he very quickly got a reputation for being the fastest and the most accurate journalist in London.
I was going to say, great prelude for what was to come, right? I mean, here we are more than 150 years later, and this guy's stuff is still resonating, right?
Absolutely.
So, and you're thinking it's to that, and to what else? I mean, why else are we picking up this stuff and continuing to be interested?
So many reasons. One, he is a darn good storyteller. He knows how to tell a story, and he knows how to create character. You can't go wrong with that. Big, wonderful characters. But the issues he was writing about are just as valid today as they were when he was writing about them, which is the really sad part of this story. The things that he saw as being difficult in society, and that he wanted to get out to all of his readers, and from all of his readers, therefore, to the people in power, the politicians. We're still struggling with the same issues. We're still struggling with homelessness and poverty and lack of food and lack of health care for people that can't afford it, all these things. And the messages are still there in the lines of his books.
Wow, and we did pull 5 books, most famous works, right? And what we'd like you to do, Gerald, if you would, is once we put a cover up, right? Yep. If you could just tell us in your own words what that book or what that work means to you. So we'll put the first one up here.
Okay, well, David Copperfield. Now that's a very interesting one to start with, because of all the novels, it's really the most autobiographical book that he wrote, especially the first half of it. A lot of his experiences when his father was in prison are recounted in Copperfield, and his struggles throughout the novel. He even uses his own initials for the title of the book, CDDC. So it's a very, very heartfelt, personal novel. He was so ashamed as to his background that he never told anyone. He never told his wife, he didn't tell his children, his closest friends. He hid it all away. And Copperfield was kind of his way of being able to exorcise those demons and get them out without ever actually admitting that he was talking about himself.
Oh, wow.
So it's a fascinating novel.
Okay, next cover, we're going to put that one up. Take a look.
Great Expectations, my favourite, without a doubt. It was one of his very last novels. It was the second last one he completed, and he really was at the top of his game when he wrote it. And that the character of Miss Havisham in Great Expectations is one of the most extraordinary creations in literature. There's this embittered elderly woman clinging on to the love she lost, living her life in her wedding dress years and years and years later in seclusion. Some people have speculated that it might have been also a picture of him approaching old age, that he was still haunted by these demons. Dickens was haunted by an awful lot of demons. That things affected him a great deal.
Okay, next.
Tale of Two Cities. Fascinating. Again, it's a very different novel in its style to many of the others. It's shorter, it's tighter. It almost reads like a modern movie screenplay. A lot of people's favourite novel because of the romance of the end. Sidney Carton making the ultimate sacrifice. It's a far better thing I do. And the the other thing about Tale of Two Cities is we often have a poll in England of the greatest opening lines of any novel, and Tale of Two Cities always wins it. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's a great opening line. He loved his opening lines, they were very important.
Okay.
Oliver Twist was only his second novel. He'd started with the Pickwick Papers, and the Pickwick Papers was little more than a comedy sort of romp, a series of little vignettes of rather pompous, silly old rich people travelling around the country and getting into scrapes. And the readers loved it, absolutely loved this comic novel. So if you're an author struggling to make a name for yourself, what do you do for your second novel? Presumably you repeat the formula that was so successful. No, you don't. You write Oliver Twist and you start writing about child abductions and crime and brutality and prostitution and murder, and he completely departed from what he'd had success with in Pickwick Papers, and the readers loved it all the more. And he suddenly discovered with Oliver Twist that he had a platform to share his social concerns with. In Oliver Twist, he was tackling parochial corruption and how dangerous that was to the children in parish care. And suddenly everybody was talking about it. So that was the springboard for him to go on and write some of his wonderful social novels that really started to change Victorian society.
Okay, fifth and final cover here.
The Nickleby portrait on the front of Nicholas Nickleby. Nickleby was his third novel, and having had that success with Oliver Twist, he almost went back a little bit to Pickwick with the comedy side of it, but mixed it in with the social awareness. He was tackling the issues of the terrible Yorkshire schools in England, where respectable people in London sent their children basically to get them out of the way, and that the children would be malnourished, maltreated, and would probably die there, and nobody knew anything about it, and that was fine for the people in London. And Dickens heard about the schools and was horrified. So created the wonderful character of Wackford Squeers, the schoolmaster. Wackford Squeers is a great name. He only had one eye, whereas the popular prejudice runs in favour of two. I mean, what a great description. and wrote brilliant scenes in the Yorkshire schools that were funny and hilarious and yet horrifying all at once. And that is where his true talent lay. He could get these horrific messages out, but in a format that people wanted to read, in an entertaining way they wanted to read. And Nickleby is a great example of that. It's also a very theatrical book. Has beautiful scenes of Victorian theatre life, which are just hilarious.
Wow. I could sit and listen to you all day here. Unfortunately, we don't have that. I want to transition into A Christmas Carol and the story behind the story.
The story behind the story?
Yeah.
Well, Dickens, as we've just discussed, was very socially aware, and he was making a speech in, I think, October 1843, to deal with the issue of care for the children of underpaid workers. So workers in factories who really weren't being paid enough, their children were suffering. It wasn't the workers that were suffering, it was the next generation. And Dickens wanted to raise awareness and raise funds to help that generation beneath. And he was going to write a political pamphlet about this issue and circulate that, thinking that might attract a little bit of interest. And he was giving a speech in Manchester to almost launch the pamphlet. And as he was talking, he thought, no, I can do so much more than just write a pamphlet. I am enjoying the popularity that no author has enjoyed. If I write a story at Christmas highlighting this issue as part of its plot, that is going to do much, much more good than any little pamphlet will do. So he started writing, and A Christmas Carol was written in the space of just a few weeks, very, very short. He rushed it. He took as its basis a plot he'd used before in the Pickwick Papers, a little story about a gravedigger who loves the fact that he's digging graves on Christmas and hates anyone enjoying themselves, and gets visited by a goblin who shows him various scenes about things. So Dickens took that little vignette and expanded it into what we know today. And it just became a labour of love. He threw himself into the writing of it. he wrote in a letter to a friend that as he wrote, he laughed, he cried, he laughed again. He just couldn't stop. And I've seen the original manuscript. It's in New York, at the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York, and they display it every year throughout the Christmas season. But I was fortunate enough to sit and be able to leaf through it. And you can just see the passion with what he was writing, because the writing is so quick and so hard, and then there are crossings out, and there's writing sort of vertically in the margins and up and along here, and you can just tell how passionate he was about it.
Wow. How many, in case you're tracking, how many adaptations do we have of that now?
I have
Is
no
it just
idea.
countless?
It's extraordinary. I mean, there are the main movie ones that we all know. There's the George C. Scott version we showed at the top, and the Alistair Sim version, and Patrick Stewart did a version. There's a musical version with Albert Finney. Then Bill Murray did it in a modernized version. The Muppets did it. Disney have done it twice. Mr. Magoo did it. You know, everybody's done it. And the great thing about it is that the story always works. You can do whatever you like to A Christmas Carol. You can do it in whatever format, and that little story always shines through as the star.
Do you have a favorite?
I love the George C. Scott version. I think he is a great Scrooge because he's so powerful. And if you think about who Scrooge was, he was a successful financier in the City of London, which at that time was the biggest economy in the world, equivalent to being on Wall Street now. And so he must have been a big businessman. He must have been powerful. He wouldn't have been a pathetic little man. So George C. Scott really plays him that way. And then, of course, the Alistair Sim 1950s version is the classic telling of the story. You can't go wrong with that.
Okay, now you yourself have an adaptation
I do.
now, a unique one at that. So before we talk more about it, tell us how that came in to play.
Well, I've been involved in theatre all my life, since the age of 9. So that's the first thing to say. And then in 1993, which was the 150th anniversary of A Christmas Carol being published, somebody came to me with the idea of recreating one of the readings that Dickens had done when he toured of A Christmas Carol to celebrate. And I was in two minds. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not. And in the end, because it was for a charity, I said, all right, I'll do it just as a one-off. That was 22 years ago. And I said, I'm not going to try and recreate what Dickens did, because I don't know what he did. I don't know what he sounded like. I don't know how he moved. We can read accounts, but that doesn't tell. So I'm going to take the script as an actor, forget my surname, as an actor, and I will just perform it as I think it deserved to be performed. And I started working at it. And in the same way Dickens getting carried away with the writing, I just got carried away with the creation of it, because the characters run into one another. You've got Scrooge. He was a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. He was hard and sharp as flint, secret. So by the time you get to the end of the sentence, you've become him. You can't help it. He's there. I haven't done anything as an actor. I've just said a sentence and I am that character. And that happens again and again. And then he never lets you rest. The scenes are always changing, all the time. The emotions are changing. You're laughing one minute, you're crying in tragedy the next minute, you're terrified a few seconds later. It's just a whirlwind of a journey. And for an actor, it is just joy to perform. You've got everything in there.
Well, then you have, though, the fact that you are his great-great-grandson,
that's
after all.
useful too.
A little bit, a little bit of pressure there, right? I can't even imagine you make it sound so easy, and I know you've been doing this for a while now. But when you think of the number of characters in A Christmas Carol, the fact that how do you do that, Gerald? How do you start with ground zero?
It all starts with that one description I just made of Scrooge. Everything starts there. Scrooge is the central character. We've got him down. Grasping, hard and sharp as flint, secret, solitary as an oyster. Everything else has to gravitate from that. So all of the other characters have to be as removed from the Scrooge character as can be. So it's just a question of building blocks. To the first one that comes into contact with him is Bob Cratchit, the clerk. So while Scrooge is very harsh and all the movements are definite and his speech, bah, humbug, is single syllables and harsh, Cratchit, I made very sort of nervous, so he's always sort of shifting around and moving and brushing, and he never quite gets to the end of his, when he says a sentence, he knows he wants to get to he wants to finish, but he doesn't, never quite gets there. So you've got this You, Cratchit, you'll want all day tomorrow. Well, if it is quite convenient. No, it's not convenient, it's not. Oh, it's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge. So suddenly you've got a contrast. Then you've got the nephew coming in, and he's big and fun, and, oh, Merry Christmas, Uncle, why don't you come and dine with... No. And it's just building all these little things. And I used a lot of dialect, a lot of English, different dialects. So the Ghost of Christmas Present is a big, bluff Yorkshireman, and the Yorkshire folk are known as welcoming and hearty and honest, and, yeah, come on, we'll go and have a look round London. So he's Yorkshireman. Ghost of Christmas Past is sort of slightly ethereal, and we don't quite know what she is, so she's very floaty, and all the hand movements are very gentle, almost sort of balletic. Whereas then you've got the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, who's absolutely rigid, and has got a very spectral, skeletal, stiff hand pointing all the time. So it's just playing and having fun and finding what works.
And I was concerned you wouldn't be able to act this out here on the set. I don't know what I was thinking. Goodness. So we pulled a short scene, and we want our viewers to take a look at you in action, offset here and actually doing this. So we'll roll that now for them.
Yes. The bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. And best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I shall live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, Jacob Marley, on my knees. His hands were busy with his garments all of this time, tearing them, mislaying them, putting them on inside out, upside down, back to front. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Whoop! Hello! Scrooge ran to the window and opened it. No fog, no mist, but clear, bright, shining, golden sunlight. What's today, my fine fellow? He called to a young boy who was passing. Aye? What's today, my fine fellow? Today? Well, it's Christmas Day.
What do you think about when you watch something like that?
Oh, dear. It's actually very interesting to watch it. Actually, watching that particular clip, I'm thinking about that venue and the great audience I have there, but there's just sort of joyousness in the words, which I get whenever I watch any version of it, whether it's watching my own version, if I can detach myself enough from it, thinking, oh, that word was wrong, or I didn't move to the right place there, or, I'll watch my own performances quite critically. Yeah. But the very important thing in my performance is that the language does the work. Charles Dickens' words do the work. So there are no special effects. There's nothing complicated. The set is nothing more than a chair, a hat rack, a stool, and maybe a fireplace, and that's all. Because if you have a set, if you have a specific set, it ties you down into one place, where Christmas Carol is always on the move. It's always different places. So I keep it as simple as possible and let the words do the work.
Audience reaction.
Everybody has so many personal feelings about A Christmas Carol. It might be that their grandfather read it to them on Christmas Eve when they were little, or it might be that they were involved in a community theatre production, or it might be that they watch the Alastair Sim version every Christmas. But everybody has a sort of memory of it. So when I perform, when I put these words out there, you can feel all of the audience sort of sharing their own experiences and emotions about the story within the performance. So by the end of it, we are all in this show. We've all lived it in our own way. And that's really exciting.
What does the show run? How long does it run?
About an hour 20.
Okay. I can't even, you must be exhausted when you're done with that.
Yeah.
How many have you done in one day?
Oh, I do 2 a day. That's my limit these days. I did do 3 a day when I started, and it wasn't so much exhaustion that got me. It was trying to remember if I was repeating myself within the same performance, or whether I just said it 2 hours before in a different performance. But it is exhausting. It's absolutely a very physical show, but a very positive exhaustion. It's a very exciting exhaustion, and when you get to the end of it and you walk off stage and you can hear applause and people clapping and cheering, and you think,
it's something like that, it's so hard to get a full appreciation. You have no one to come out and save you. You're there all by yourself, right? And the pace is quick, and
that's the positive and the negative of doing the one-man show. And the positive far outweighs any negatives. I love being there on my own, and if something does go wrong, then that's it. It's up to me. Sort it out. Okay. You're not going to be helped out.
In the few minutes we have remaining, what are you doing when you're not doing this, right? Do you have a life outside of this?
Well, my professional life, I have a repertoire of about 12 different shows, all one-man format. I think because I've been doing one-man shows for so long now, I've become a bit of a selfish actor and nobody else would act with me anymore. But I have a repertoire of 12 shows, mainly based on Dickens. I have one based on Great Expectations, one based on Nickleby, a show called Mr. Dickens is Coming, which is a biographical show about his theatrical side, which is a lot of fun. Shows based on his trips to America, a show called The Republic of My Imagination, and Charles' Journey with Dickens. Some of the readings that he performed I have turned into dramatizations now. The Signalman, great ghost story, a piece called Dr. Marigold, which was one of the most popular pieces he used to do and nobody's ever heard of today, which is absolutely charming. So, and you never ever tire of Dickens. You never, you can never have too much of him. I'll be reading a novel and come across a phrase and I will just gasp in admiration because he was so clever. So I love surrounding myself with Dickens in my working life.
We have about 30 seconds, truly. Any family members going to follow in your footsteps?
I have no idea. My son shows not the slightest interest at the moment, but neither did I when I was 16, so who knows?
Only time will tell.
Yeah.
I want to put up a website here so that if people want more information about you, the great-great-grandson of Charles Dickens, they can just simply go to GeraldDickens.com. It was such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Kathy, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Best wishes to you moving forward.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.
Absolutely.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.